Welcome to Reading with Rhyme. On today's episode of our Ramadan Reading Reflection series, our 13th, we're going to look at a book that has been, for me, an immensely meaningful spiritual guide in the process of wayfaring toward God. And that is Ibn Arabī, Divine Governance of the Human Kingdom, interpreted by the late Shaykh Tosun Bayrak of the Jerrahi al-Halveti order, published in 1997 by Fons Vitae Press in Louisville, Kentucky. This is one of the most singularly beautiful texts I have read on the spiritual journey, and specifically on the divine governance of the levels of the soul that one will experience throughout one's entire life. And there's this magnificent harmonization of the macrocosm and the microcosm. And this book is one that I believe is the best introduction to Ibn Arabī's thought for those who do not have prior training in Islamic mysticism or Sufism, in specifically the inner sciences of the comprehension of the multivalent, many-leveled meanings of Arabic words, specifically in their Sufi lexicographical contexts. So for those who have not yet undertaken guided instruction with a teacher on the way, whether in a formal tariqah or not, a formal Sufi order, this work is of immense value for anyone who has not yet been, or for whatever reason chooses not to be, initiated into a particular order. The Sheikh himself was the Sheikh of the Jerrahi Halveti order, which is one of the most prominent in Turkey and the Turkish diaspora throughout the world. It was founded in the 18th century in Istanbul, and it has its antecedents and its roots in members of the Mevlevi order, the order founded by Maulana Rumi and formalized by his son. But the order itself is one that grew to a special prominence in the late Ottoman period among the intellectual elite of Istanbul and the surrounding environs. To begin, the dedication by Shaykh Tosun Bayrak reads, "My humble thanks to Sheikh Shams Friedlander, Sheikh Jamila Bayrak, Rabia Harris, and Zinur Doganata. They are my companions on the path to the truth, and have all contributed to this work. May Allah be pleased with them, and may He not abandon me, His humble servant, to myself." I was blessed to meet the late Sidi Shams Friedlander, or Sheikh Sidi Shams Friedlander, in suburban Istanbul, when I also met the first time with Sidi Harun, Michael Sugic, and both men were basking in sohbah together in beautiful company and companionship. They'd been friends for many, many years. And I was just simply amazed, just looking upon and observing the depth of their friendship. It was very clear that this was a friendship rooted above all else in a common love for God, in invocation of the Supreme Name, and in a love and devotion to the Prophet and his path, and the path of the awliya, the beloved friends of God, devoted to him. So this was very beautiful for me to witness, and I unfortunately only met Sidi Shams once before he passed away, but the meeting was one that I will never forget. He was regaling us with stories of life in Cairo, life in various parts of the Muslim world that he had lived in and traveled in, and he presented me with his spiritual autobiography, Winter's Harvest, which I will certainly do a video on in the future. It's a beautiful text. What I was struck most by about Sidi Shams, was his self-deprecation. Certain Sufis have a particular air of majesty about them, so they would reflect the Jalali aspect, or the awesome side of God, as it were, or the awesome side of the prophetic character. They can appear quite serious. And then there are those shayukh who embody more the beautiful or gentle side, the Jamali aspect. So this is called the right hand of God and the left hand of God in some ways, or the hand of mercy and the hand of wrath. And Sidi Shams, in my presence, only embodied the Jamali, the gentle, loving, and beautiful. Despite that he had had some medical pains and troubles, he laughed often. And when he laughed, his whole face was lit up. And his eyes, particularly, I remember his eyes, which were quite glowing. And it was more than just the beauty of the day. It was a balmy September day, and the flat where we were was directly overlooking the Sea of Marmara, the Propontis, and it was magnificent, the scene. But yet, I remember at the dinner, his eyes, the light was twinkling, truly. It was very inspirational for me to notice. So I, of course, never had the blessing to meet Shaykh Tosun Bayrak, but of course, seeing that the dedication includes Shaykh Shams, I was moved to remembrance. So in Arabic, this is called in full At-Ṭaḍbirāt al-ilahiyyāh fi islah al-mamlakāt al-insaniyyāh. And this text is one that I believe requires us to first look at the translator's introduction. For those of you who are not already familiar with Ibn Arabī, I've been studying his works for a number of years. One of my professors that I have learned a great deal from is something of an expert on him, although he would probably not even like to be associated with that term expert, because one can spend 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years with Ibn Arabī and continue to find new gems and new challenges and new things to ponder. One is ever in the state of finding and being, so coming from the same Arabic root, wajada, wajid, so wujud, being, and wajada, finding. So being through finding and finding through being. But my professor spoke very highly of the late Shaykh Tosun Bayrak, and then some of my friends in Istanbul had introduced me to that order, and the ceremonies of dhikr are of an extraordinary beauty, majesty, and solemnity, if I were to use three words that more than any other, three adjectives, that they were immensely beautiful, solemn, and dignified. And also, I must add, quite ethereal in their beauty. Muhyi ibn Arabī is one of the greatest personalities in both Islamic and universal mysticism. Both the Eastern and Western worlds are in agreement as to his greatness, although they do not necessarily agree as to what sort of greatness it is. For over 700 years, the world of Islam has been in controversy about the Shaykh. Many people love, respect, and admire him, though there are also those who belittle and curse him. Far-sighted people of refined intelligence have always found treasures in the depths of the vast ocean of his words, and have called him a Shaykh al-Akbār, the greatest teacher, or the greatest of spiritual guides. But narrow-minded people, blinded by fanaticism, who cannot penetrate into his work, have insulted him by calling him a Shaykh al-Akbār, the greatest of heretics. Great men have more enemies than friends. Even when our master Muhammad, so here he's using the term in English translation of Sayyidina, our master, our liege, our Lord, Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, shed his light upon a world buried under the night of ignorance and corruption. Even then, only a few welcomed him. Many, whose eyes were used to darkness, did not see his light, nor did they want to. Ibn Arabī all his life felt the pain of not being understood, yet the breadth and depth of his wisdom, insight, vision, and knowledge was and is awesome to whomever catches a glimpse of it. Many of his expressions of divine mysteries have never been improved upon. Many important affairs, which he foretold centuries ago, have taken place and continue to take place. Despite or because of the controversy surrounding him, Ibn Arabī has become one of the most important expounders of Sufi wisdom. His influence quickly spread even beyond the Islamic world. entering medieval Europe. In their famous studies, Asín Palacios and Salvador de Grave have pointed out that Dante, in the Divina Commedia, the Divine Comedy, was often inspired by Ibn Arabi's works, deriving from them both the grand design of hell and paradise and the image of the beatified, beatified young woman as guide to the divine. Through Dante's prestige, these themes permeated old Europe. Today, the Shaykh's influence on the spiritual growth of humanity continues to grow as his works become more and more available in the West. His words are like waves in an immense sea containing endless secrets. He produced, through inspiration, perhaps 500 books. Many of them are short, about the length of a long article. Some, like the Fusus al-Hikam, the Muhyi an-Nujum, or the Futuhat al-Makkiyah, are books of many volumes that have responded to the questions and yearning of multitudes of seekers since his time. They are well springs of wisdom. Yet there is a great deal of thought in these books that cannot be digested by many intelligent people, even scholars, if their intelligence and knowledge are not supported by pure and believing hearts. Nor is this wisdom accessible to theologians who see only the surface and the form, the soma, the body, the jism of their religion. In his prime, Ibn Arabi was a thin, middle-sized man, well-proportioned, with small, delicate hands and feet. His skin was white. His head was small, with a round face, high forehead, and a fine, slightly curved nose of medium size. He had eyebrows curved like the crescent moon, and he wore a thick white beard. He was courageous and tenacious, extremely patient, and very generous with both the material things he owned and the deep wisdom he possessed. Although not everyone understood him, all were in awe of his spiritual presence. Always gentle, compassionate, and merciful, he viewed everything with love, including his enemies and dangerous animals. He detested violence, even in the punishment of murderers. He wrote, "Although according to religious law the punishment for murder is death, it is better to forgive." He also wrote, "On the day of judgment, I will intercede for those who deny me." One of his contemporaries hated him so much that he would curse him 10 times after each of his 5 daily canonical prayers. When the man died, Ibn Arabi went to his funeral. Afterwards, he wouldn't eat or drink or see anyone for days. A close friend insisted that the Shaykh come to his house for dinner. He obliged, but neither spoke nor ate, until all of a sudden he smiled and started eating. When his friend asked him about his recent state, he said, "I vowed to my Lord that I would go into retreat, khalwa, and fast until he forgave that man who hated me so. Now, Allah in His mercy has forgiven him, so I can return to the life of this world." Muhammad Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Arabī was born on the 7th of August, 1165, or 560 Anno Hijri, on the 27th day of Ramadan. That's today. In the city of Murcia, in Andalusia. He was a descendant of Hatim al-Ṭa'i, the legendary model of Arab generosity. Ibn Arabi's father saw the potential in his son early, and when the family moved to the great cultural center of Seville, he had him thoroughly educated. At 8 years of age, he began to study hadith, Quranic commentary, or tafsir, and Quranic recitation, qira'at, with the famous teachers of the time. He also studied the literary arts and physical sciences, and associated throughout his youth with many Sufis, including 2 distinguished female spiritual guides. At a very tender age, he thus became accomplished in both worldly and religious knowledge. Even his teachers respected the intelligence and wisdom of this child. Once, his father sent the youthful Muhyi to visit the greatest philosopher of the era, Ibn Rushd, Averroes, in the Western parlance. Ibn Rushd was amazed by the supernatural talent and aptitude of the young man. He received him with respect and even debated with him. During their interview, Muhyi was able to answer questions whose answers were only known to Ibn Rushd. Ibn Rushd was amazed to see that this young man knew things instantly and miraculously that he himself had only obtained through years of study and reflection. It was as if the youth were reading his mind. He said that having read that such people existed, he was thankful to Allah for bringing him such a being. Still, the great philosopher, proud of his knowledge, was unable to see his young guide's true value, and continued in his own way. For his part, Muhyi wished to encounter Ibn Rushd again. In his dreams, though, he saw veils between himself and the philosopher. He understood this to mean that there was no way for understanding and agreement to exist between them. So another meeting never took place. When Ibn Rushd died in Marrakesh in 1199, or 595 Anno Hijri, his body was sent back to Cordoba. Ibn Arabī was there, and he observed with sadness that the transport camel bore on one side the coffin of Ibn Rushd, and on the other side, as a counterbalance, the books the philosopher had written. While Muhyi was still a youth, he also made the extraordinary acquaintance of Khidr, or Khazr, or Hizr, depending on, in Turkish he's called Khizr, in Arabic Khidr, and so on, a wandering immortal sent by Allah to assist his special friends. Since the young man himself was destined to wander for much of his life, and had unique access to hidden things, many people came to believe that the cryptic Khidr was Ibn Arabī's special patron. In 1201, or 598 Anno Hijri, when his father and mother had both died, and his first marriage had concluded, Muhyi left Seville, intending to perform the major pilgrimage, the Hajj. He never returned to Spain. The Sheikh's journey eventually included all of North Africa, the Near East, and Anatolia. He visited Marrakesh and Fez in Morocco, Algeria, Tunis and Egypt, Mecca and Medina on the Arabian Peninsula, Syria and Iraq, and the cities of Malatya, Sivas, and Konya of the Seljuk Empire, what is today Turkey and Armenia. He traveled, in fact, through the entire Arabic-speaking world. Before he left on this epic journey, he had a vision in which all the prophets were gathered. The prophet Hud, one of the Arab prophets mentioned in the Quran, that is not mentioned in the Bible, advanced to meet him, and Muhyi asked him the reason for such a gathering. Hud replied that the prophets had met together to intercede with Allah on behalf of the great Sufi martyr Mansur al-Hallaj, who, as punishment for certain critical statements, he famously said, Anna al-Haq, I am the truth, or truth with a capital T, meaning I am the real, the one, God, so this was taken as blasphemy, had been kept apart for centuries from the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, meaning his body was not allowed to be buried anywhere near the Prophet, and that he was, in the spiritual realm, kept separate after bodily death from the Prophet. In this vision, Muhyi was also shown his own life in its entirety from the beginning to the end. This made him decide to start his travels immediately. His first stop was Marrakesh in Morocco. There, a dream directed him on to Fez. In his monumental work, the Futuhat al-Makkiyah, the Meccan Revelations, or Meccan Openings, he relates the dream. I saw a treasure under the divine throne, where the verse, there is no power or strength save in God, Allah the High, the Great, is generated. I visited many other treasures under that one, from every corner of which beautiful birds flew out. The most beautiful of them all flew in front of me and gave me greetings. It was revealed to my heart that I should take it as my companion in my travels to the regions of the East. I asked my heart, who may this companion be? I was in Marrakesh at that time. My heart told me, he is Muhammad al-Hazar in the city of Fez, who begged Allah to bring him to the East. So take him with you as your companion. I was pleased with this and told the beautiful bird, Allah willing, inshallah, you will be my companion. I went to Fez, sought and found him, and asked him, have you prayed to Allah for something?" "Yes," he said. "I begged him to send me to the cities of the East, and I was told that someone called Muhyi would take me there." I smiled and said, "I am Muhyi." We became companions and friends until we reached Egypt, where he died. During this period of his life, Ibn Arabi spent his time fasting, praying, and meditating. The last period of intense worship, which raised him to the level of sainthood, took 9 months, from Muharram to the end of the month of Ramadan. He neither ate nor drank, and was in a continuous state of ecstasy. In Tunis, on their way to Egypt, Ibn Arabi and Muhammad al-Hassar had a strange experience. The Shaykh relates, "On our way, I found a man living in a marsh, in a place covered with rushes. I learned that he had lived there for 30 years in seclusion. I stayed with him for 3 days. He prayed day and night and did strange things. Every morning he went fishing and caught 3 fish. One he would let go, one was his meal for the whole day, and one he gave to the poor. As I was about to leave, he asked me where I was going. I told him, to Egypt. Tears came to his eyes. 'Oh,' he said, 'my beloved master, my Shaykh, is in Egypt. Please go to him and give him my respects and greetings. Ask him to advise me what to do with myself in this world.' I was amazed. That man had abandoned this world and the worldly. It seemed to me that he did not need any advice about it. When I went to Egypt, I found his Shaykh living in a palace in complete luxury and wealth. He appeared to be nothing more than a man of the world. When I told him the request of his dervish in Tunis, he said, 'Go and tell him that he shall take the love of this world out of his heart.' This also amazed me, coming from him, since he lived in a palace. On my return to Tunis, I found the secluded fisherman and told him what his master had said. He shed tears of blood. 'Woe is me! For 30 years I have separated myself from the world and spent my time in worship, but my heart still belongs to the world. While my master lives within the riches of this world, he hasn't a drop of it in his heart, neither its love nor its worries. O Muhyi, that is the difference between him and me.'" This story related by Ibn Arabi became the essence for many who followed the mystic path, while others withdrew themselves from the world, trying to purify their hearts in caves and cells. Ibn Arabi and other Sufis, following his example, wandered the world, viewing the beauties of creation and finding in it traces of divine power. They used the world as an object of meditation and remembrance of Allah. Indeed, seclusion is like a hospital for the sick at heart. As one does not stay in a hospital forever, neither is it right to stay in seclusion for more than a short while. Perfecting one's humanity comes through living together socially. At best, seclusion is necessary to clean the mirror of one's heart, which then must be taken out to the world, where the manifestation of divine power reflects on it and brings knowledge of the Creator. When Ibn Arabi came to Egypt, he met most of the scholars, the ulama, wise men, and sages there. The Qutb, the chief saint of the time, was also in Egypt. Ibn Arabi found him, for he knew that the perfection of his mystical growth depended on divine knowledge manifest in such saints, rather than in only praying and fasting and withdrawing from the world. He relates his encounter with the Qutb. So the Qutb means the axial pole of the age, the chief of the insan al-kamil, the chief of the perfected men on the earth. One day the Qutb asked to have a feast prepared for the community of sages in Egypt. We had made a meat dish, which cooked for a long time in large earthenware pots. After the food was brought to the tables, when everyone had taken one mouthful, all the pots broke. Suspecting a divine sign in that strange event, the Qutb addressed us, saying, "What do you think is the reason for this strange happening?" Many answered, giving physical reasons, and some theological ones. One comment interested the kutub. Someone suggested that the pots were trying to say, "I have been honored by the hands of the friends of Allah who came close to me. That is sufficient for me. If I hadn't destroyed myself, I would have risked that the enemies of Allah might cook onions and garlic and leeks in me." Then the kutub turned to me and said, "Oh Muhyi, what do you think?" I said, "The pot is telling us, may your heart break in 1,000 pieces if you put in it the love of others, after the love of Allah has entered it." The kutub smiled and approved and said, "That is exactly what I think." Thus, spiritual knowledge and the divine wisdom obtained through it bring one closer to the truth, enable one to see the inner reality, and grant the ability to take lessons from everything one sees. Ibn Arabī went on to Mecca, where he stayed for several intensely visionary years. Here he encountered his female image of knowledge, the young girl Nizam, a sage among the sages of the holy places, who inspired his famous poetic work, the Tarjuman al-Ashwaq, the translator of ardent desires. Here too he married again to Fatima bint Yunus, daughter of the Sharif, and fathered a son, Imad ad-Din, who would follow his father and eventually, in 1269 or 667 Anno Hijri, share his tomb. In Mecca he also began his monumental work, al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah, the Meccan openings or revelations. The Futuhat was a vast compendium of insights and unique symbolic teachings. Each of the 8 volumes took a calligrapher 2 years to copy. What it contains is not knowledge obtained from university scholars or written in books, but wisdom revealed from divine sources, discovered through personal experience. When he was writing it, it was as if he were forced to do so, against his will. He became feverish and would sweat, even when it was cold. He confessed, "I do not write literature out of my own will and inclination, as others do, but I receive such powerful inspiration that it burns my very being. Only writing it down extinguishes the fire." For instance, he relates in the Futuhat an inspiration he received. "As I was circumambulating the Kaaba, I saw a strange person, quite different in appearance from what I was accustomed to seeing among the people. As he walked around the Kaaba, he continually recited, 'We, like you, are circumambulating this house.' I caught up with him and asked him who he was. He said, 'I am your ancestor, far removed.' 'When did you live?' he asked. 'I died over 40,000 years ago.' Ibn Arabī was perplexed. He said, 'But they say Adam, may Allah's blessings be upon him, was the first man, and lived only 6,000 years ago.' 'Which Adam do you mean?' the figure replied. 'Know that he is only the last of 100,000 Adams who came and passed away before him.' Indeed, Tosun Bayrak now comments, indeed, modern science has discovered evidence of people who lived hundreds of thousands of years ago. There is no indication in the Holy Quran, nor in the Hadiths, that man was created only 7,000 years ago. This idea came from an interpretation of certain genealogies attached to the Torah. The Shaykh relates another such incident that occurred in Mecca. One Friday, after the congregational prayers, I was circumambulating the Kaaba. I saw a man whose costume and physical appearance were very different from those of everyone else. He seemed to be floating in the crowd, passing in between people without even touching them. It was revealed to me that he was a pure spirit, made visible. I stopped and greeted him and talked to him. His name was Ahmed as-Sabti. I asked him how it was that he was given the privilege of assuming a form and shape and of performing the Hajj after having left this world, after having died. He said, "I used to work for this world only 1 day a week. For my sustenance, I spent the rest of my time in worship." "What did you do for work?" Which day did you work?" I asked him. "Saturday," he said, "because Allah Most High began the creation on Sunday, and ceased working on that day. So I worked the day he ceased work, and I received the profit of the 6 days he worked. Who was the Qutb when you were in this world? I asked him. He said that he was. Then he disappeared. A Meccan friend of mine who was present asked me, who was that person who talked to you? I have not seen such a person in Mecca all my life. As Hafiz ibn Najjar has said, Ibn Arabī was a Qutb and knew the other Qutubs of his time. Furthermore, he knew the Qutubs of past and future. Mostly, he kept company with the Sufis and spent his time at the Kaaba. This seemed to be his only pleasure. Despite his deep attraction to the Kaaba, his business in Mecca was temporarily concluded 2 years later, and he resumed his travels. In the year 1204, Ibn Arabī came to Baghdad. He stayed only 12 days. In that brief time, he found and wore the cloak that had been left for him 50 years before by the pivotal Sufi teacher Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, and met with the wise men and sages of Baghdad. He spent another 3 years on the road in Mosul and in Egypt before returning to Mecca in 1207. This time he could spend only a year in Mecca before the journey summoned him. He returned to Mosul, proceeded through Malatya and Sivas, and came in 1210 to Konya, the political and cultural capital of the western part of the Seljuk Empire. In Konya he is believed to have married the widowed mother of Sadruddin al-Qunawi. Sadruddin was the grandson of the Sultan of Malatya, and already a promising Sufi. His intention in this marriage was more than having a good wife. It was also to have as a son Sadruddin, who later became one of his most important disciples. The Sheikh's other blood son and his daughter were possibly born from this marriage. Sadruddin, born in Malatya in 1220, devoted his life to the study of Hadith and died in Damascus in 1258. His beloved daughter Zainab probably died while still a child. Ibn Arabī came back to Baghdad in 1211. Here he encountered another great Sufi sheikh. Shahabuddin Umar as-Surkhwardi. When they met, they meditated upon each other without saying a word. Surkhwardi's opinion: Ibn Arabī is the ocean of truth. Everything he is and everything he does follows the example of the Prophet. Both his visible self and his inner self reflect and are filled with the light of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. It was around this time that Ibn Arabī's mystical knowledge reached perfection. He was so immersed in the ocean of truth that his words, as well as his inner being, became invisible and inconceivable to those who remained on the shore. From 1213 to 1221, he moved from Baghdad to Aleppo, back to Mecca, back to Malatya, and again to Aleppo. During this period, he increasingly encountered envy and misunderstanding, much of which he attempted to disarm. But he also found supporters in high places, for example, al-Malik as-Zahir, ruler of Aleppo, and al-Malik al-Adil, ruler of Damascus. When in 1223, al-Adil implored him to settle in his city, he accepted. His wanderings were finally over. Except for a brief visit to Aleppo, he would remain in Damascus for 30 years. Since the event is said to have occurred in 1223, it must have been in Damascus that Ibn Arabī met a young man who would become another Sufi of universal scope and appeal, Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, inspirer of the Mevlevi or Malawi Sufis, the famous whirling dervishes. It was still 5 years before Rumi and his family, now wandering as refugees, would move to Konya, where Ibn Arabī's disciple, Sadruddin al-Qunawi, would later become attached to Jalaluddin as well. The adolescent Jalaluddin accompanied his father, Bahauddin, one of the greatest men of knowledge of his time, on a visit to Ibn Arabī, who recalled this meeting with pleasure. I asked Jalaluddin how old he was, and he answered that he was a year younger than Huda, Allah the Guide. According to the numerical value of the letters, the word Huda adds up to 605. As Jalaluddin said he was a year younger, it meant that he was born in 604. so 1207 CE, which is indeed when he was born. As Baha'u'ddin and young Jalaluddin took their leave, Ibn Arabi said, "Amazing that an ocean is following a small lake." Not all of the Shaykh's encounters in Damascus were happy ones. Many of the scholars and theologians there, as elsewhere, envied and hated him, not least because he had the favor of the prince and his highest officials. Their claim, though, was always that his religion was suspect. One scholar who defended him was Kamaluddin Ash-Shami. "Those of you who deny him and condemn him and claim not to understand him, come to me," he offered. "I will speak in your tongue, help you in your difficulties, and eliminate your doubts." It is not clear that his offer was very widely accepted. In his turn, Ibn Arabi was none too fond of the scholars of Damascus, but their opposition to him was not the reason. He disliked them because they sold their knowledge for profit, which goes against the Quran, quite literally, and that money had become a veil preventing them from seeing the truth. He hated money, and he hated the people who made money their god. Someone once gave him an enormously valuable palace as a gift. Immediately after he accepted it, a beggar came and asked him for money. He had none to give. "O man in need," he said, "I have no possessions except this palace. Please take it for the love of Allah." And he gave the beggar the palace. One day in Damascus, he saw an imam, a lover of money, not of Allah, leading a whole congregation of people who also had the love of money in their hearts. He called to them from the door, saying, "I am treading upon the God you worship. He is under my feet." The congregation left their prayer to curse him and beat him. Some say he died from the wounds that he received on this occasion. He left this world on the night of Friday, November 16th, 1240, in 638 Anno Hijri, the 28th day of the Arabic month, Arabī al-Thani, the second Rabi. He was 76 years old. His funeral prayer was presided over by the Qadi of Damascus, and he was buried in the quarter of Salahiyah. The scholars eventually had their revenge. His grave later became the site of a garbage dump. So it remained until the Ottoman Sultan, Selim I the Resolute, took the city of Damascus from the Mamluks. Sultan Selim believed that Ibn Arabi had predicted his conquest of the Near East and Egypt in an essay called Shajarat al-Numaniyah fi Dawlat al-Uthmaniyah, which described the Ottoman state long before it existed. In that essay it was also written, when the letter S enters the letter Sh, when Sin enters Shin, Muhyiddin's tomb will be discovered. The learned men in the Ottoman court interpreted the letter S as standing for Selim, and the letter Sh as the city of Sham, Damascus, the capital of Syria. They informed the Sultan that he would discover the saint's tomb when he conquered Damascus. Indeed, when Selim entered Damascus, the first thing he did was to search. He found the lost grave covered with garbage. The great warrior wept and ordered a tomb and mosque built on the site. Then he commissioned Shaykh Muhyi, one of the greatest theologians of the time, to write a book on Ibn Arabi's life and works. Shaykh Muhyi wrote al-Janib al-Gharibi fi Mushkilat Ibn Arabi, attempting to clarify some of the misunderstandings about Ibn Arabi's thoughts in a language even narrow-minded people would understand. Other scholars of the time were encouraged by the Sultan to write 40 commentaries on the Fusus al-Hikam, the bezels or ringstones of wisdom. Sultan Selim also visited the mosque, where the attack that may have caused the saint's death had occurred. He found the spot where the Shaykh had said, "The God you worship is under my feet," and had it excavated. A treasure of gold coins was discovered. May Allah have mercy on the soul of Muhyiddin ibn Arabi, and may he be pleased with him and bestow peace upon his soul. May the Creator of all, Master of the universes, seen and unseen, known and unknown, Allah, free of all fault, heedlessness, defect, and deficiency, pure and most holy, knower and container of all things, the Lord who preserves us from all disasters and calamities, bestow his blessings and grace upon our Master Muhammad, upon his family and companions. May Allah bestow his peace and blessings upon our Master Muhammad, upon all the prophets and messengers, upon the saints and the righteous servants, upon the angels, upon those who reside by the throne of grace, and upon all faithful servants among the peoples of the earth and in the heavens. Amen. Shaykh Tosun Bayrak notes that this book is one of the early books of Ibn Arabī, written in all probability about the year 1194 in Andalusia, certainly before his migration to the eastern realms of the Islamic world. He explains the cause which induced him to write this guide of how to fare in this life if one was meant to live it as God's supreme creation. When I visited the house of Sheikh Abdul Muhammad al-Mururi, I found a book called The Secret of Secrets, Sirur Esrar, written by Hakim, as by Aristotle, who was too old to accompany Dhul-Qarnayn, Alexander the Great, in his campaigns. The book contains instructions of how to rule the world. Abu Muhammad told me, this book is about ruling the world. What I want you to do is write a book about the governance of the human kingdom, the soul, the heart, and the mind, of how to govern our own selves, where our real salutation rests. Upon this request, I wrote this book in the city of Marur in less than 4 days. Hakim's is 1/4 or 1/3 of my book in length. There is much more circumspection, information, and meaning in the management of one human being and governing of a worldly kingdom, which Hakim ignored in his book. In other words, Aristotle wrote famously on politics. He wrote an entire compendium of essays examining the political constitutions of different Greek states in the Eastern Mediterranean world. This book will serve those kings who are the servants of their servants, and lead the ones who realize that this life is but a road leading to the hereafter. Just to quote briefly from chapter 1. The soul, the divine deputy, the king of the human realm. It is a fact that the universal soul within man is the ruler of the human being and deputy of the Creator. For the Lord of humanity said, Behold, thy Lord said to the angels, I will create a deputy on earth. Surah Bakr, verse 30. As man is created central to the universe and is the microcosm to the macrocosm, the soul is central to the human being and is the deputy of the Lord, to protect ourselves from the criticism and assault of those who look upon life and the world only from the outside, and who are blind to their outer and inner selves. We must explain what we mean. God, the ultimate truth, guides us to truth and shows us the truth through the wisdom bestowed upon us by the ones who trod this path before us and who have entered this realm and understood what they saw. May God shed light upon your inner eye, O follower of this path. Know that the first being that God invented and thought of and created is a singular, basic essence, which is not formed into any creed or principle, yet which appears to exist in the next creed or principle. Though some philosophers claim that the first creation is a single being because only one can come out of one, if God had so wished, his will and power could have created many beings at once. To think otherwise would mean that God's will is limited and his power is lacking. God has the ability to create any and all things at once, and there is nothing to prevent it. What is perhaps to be inquired into is the location of the source and the place of the divine power. If there is a proof that the first creation is a single being, that also is only his wish and his will. I, Muhammad, son of Ali, Muhyi al-Arabī, say, the rationalists explain their thoughts about the soul as God's deputy in different ways. Some call it the clear book of evidence. Some call it the divine throne. Others call it the mirror of truth. It is a fact that the Creator bestowed upon every human being a different attribute out of his own divine attributes, and a different influence from his own esteem, and rendered him special. May God's pleasure be upon Muhammad Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, who said on the subject of the human soul as the deputy of God, "The deputy which God sent as the master of all things is the soul, and the soul is not created, it is directly from the realm of God's command." The Sufis have found the proof of al-Ghazali's words in the Holy Quran, where it is written, "They will ask you of the soul. Say, the spirit is from the realm of my Lord's command." The surah is Bani Israel, the children of Israel, verse 85. Therefore the soul is under the orders of God. It is within the knowledge of the Lord, and is revealed by the Lord. Thus the man of knowledge, believing that the origin of the soul is divine, believes that it received God's orders directly from his realm of power, without any intermediary, and each such command is meant to fulfill certain functions. Thus the first cause named by the philosophers is the absolute existence of the one and only. If another existence, attached to the causal existence, is added to him, it becomes a second cause, and it becomes the first creation. In the created universe, every existence is the effect of a preceding cause. It is said in the Holy Quran, "Is it not his to create and to govern? Blessed be God, the cherisher and sustainer of the worlds." Surah Araf, verse 54. He has created all and everything with his knowledge. Know that he both creates and commands the created. The Lord of the universe is eternal. The nature of his essence is divine. He is one without any other, the Lord, unique, mighty, and glorious. If we believe that the universe is created by him and governed by him, and that the soul of man is his extension, his command to set and keep order in the universe, the real meaning is learned and understood, and no more has to be said. God is the one who tells the truth and leads to the straight path. Yet I must add, may God's pleasure be upon them, some of the rationalists said that the soul was not the first creation, but the most appropriate of all possibilities, the first edition. Yet they named it with the attribute of a created thing. To name a thing with an attribute characteristic to it is not far-fetched. In fact, in the designation of the first created matter, the Lord has created things in twos. One he created without a cause or intermediary, which in turn caused the creation of another. God did not create the creation in jest, but created it as necessary causes. The truth is, the first existence was created without a preceding cause, and that existence became the cause of the creation of the others. Yet another cause to be considered is the preceding thought, such as the thought of satisfying hunger preceding eating, or the thought of quenching one's thirst before drinking, wishing to solve a problem before learning, to wish to do the right thing before taking action, the thought of God's reward instigating a good deed, the fear of his punishment to be considered before sinning, and so on. Therefore, when the thinkers realized this and penetrated into the meaning of it, they named the intellect as the first created matter, and as they didn't see any opposition to it in Islam, they called it the throne of God. The intellect that they've called it the throne is because it is conceived as the center of the universe and the source of all that God has commanded and forbidden. It is as if the gravitational center of the whole universe, to which everything is connected, its place is conceived to be on the ninth heaven. The soul of man, the deputy of God, is surrounded by the microcosm, which is called the human